Hello, my name is Arielle Ford, and I'm one of the founding partners of Spiritual Cinema Circle. Today, my special guest is James Twyman, best-selling author, filmmaker, and musician. He's traveled to some of the world's greatest areas of conflict, sharing his message of peace. Known as the Peace Troubadour, James has performed his concerts in Iraq, Northern Ireland, South Africa, Bosnia, and Serbia, drawing millions of people together in prayer to influence events of world crisis. He is the author of 12 books, including his most recent New York Times bestseller, The Moses Code. He's also produced or directed 4 films, including the film version of Moses Code and the award-winning Indigo. His CDs have inspired hundreds of thousands of people, and his performances at the United Nations, U.S. Capitol, and Pentagon, as well as projects such as The Cloth of Many Colors, have made him one of the most influential spiritual peacemakers in the world. Founder of the Seminary of Spiritual Peacemaking, James is the president of the Beloved Community, which is an interreligious organization that has ordained more than 400 ministers of peace around the world. Jimmy, it's so great to see you again.
It is great to be here. Anything for the Spiritual Cinema Circle.
That's what we love about you. So let me ask you, your personal spiritual quest and your work on behalf of peace is so impressive. How did you get started?
Well, looking back, there are so many benchmarks, but I think the primary one happened in 1994 when a friend of mine gave me the sheet of paper that had the peace prayers from all the different religions of the world. And I had one of those experiences that only come around a few times in one's life where I was reading them and I literally began to hear this music as if it was playing in the next room. And I picked up my guitar as I was reading in that moment the Hindu prayer for peace. And I just began to play along, and it was almost as if the music was already written. Maybe it took 5 minutes for it to kind of come through. Then I began to read the Muslim prayer and the same thing, and the Buddhist prayer, and one after another, until within 1 hour I had arranged all 12 of them to music. And I knew that a gift like that is not given just for one person. It was meant to be shared, and that was when people began to call me the Peace Troubadour, and I was like this penniless troubadour traveling around with my guitar in a backpack and wanted to go to countries where the real battles were happening, and that's really how it all began.
I remember hearing you perform all 12 of those peace prayers, but for somebody who's watching who may not know what a peace prayer is, will you recite one of them for us?
Absolutely. The Hindu prayer, the very first one, first I'll do it in the original Sanskrit, which is Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotir Gamaya Minityoma Amnitam Gamaya Shanti Shanti. And in English, which is how I put it to music, it's, O God, lead us from the unreal to the real. O God, lead us from darkness into light. O God, lead us from death to immortality. Shanti Shanti, or peace unto all.
So I know that quite often you go to these areas of great conflict, and obviously you're in some kind of danger. Just share with us one situation where you might have gotten into a lot of trouble.
I remember the first time I went to Iraq, it was in 1998, and I actually went there at the invitation of Saddam Hussein. My first book had just come out, and I was on a book tour in England, and just one thing led to another, and suddenly I'm in Baghdad, and it was such a strange experience, and I was being driven around by people from the Ministry of Information, and a very close eye was always on me. But what I found, which is really the same thing I found everywhere I've gone, which is that the people really are no different than any of us. There are, of course, those cultural differences, but deep down, they were longing for peace just as we were, and I think their motivation was perhaps propaganda to bring this American peace troubadour over. But once I was there, for example, I did the concert in the National Theater, and they had a big party afterwards where all we really did was sit around singing Simon and Garfunkel songs all night long. And this was in Baghdad. It was not at all what I expected.
So did you ever travel with body armor?
No, I had never have. The next time I went to Iraq, they didn't even let me in the green zone. I had to stay out with the real people, which was fine by me. You know, it's never what you think it's going to be, or it's never how it's represented in the media. Of course, they make it so much more dramatic and dangerous. For the most part, as I said before, the people that you always meet when you're just among the people are delightful, and I think those have brought me some of the richest experiences.
You know, one thing I always wanted to ask you is, I know your intention going to these places is to bring peace, but don't you have some real evidence that peace actually came about as a result of your songs?
Well, yes, we do, and this began on that first trip to Iraq. My agent at that time sent out a few hundred emails asking people to pray at the same time that I was doing that concert, just to, you know, offer their prayers of peace so that we wouldn't have to fall into another war. And little did I know that that email just became viral. And I think it was one of the first times that it ever happened, where it just spread and everyone knew about it. And then we began to take that opportunity because we realized that people wanted excuses to do this. So Greg Braden and Doreen Virtue and I began to do several of these prayer vigils, and we even found ways to scientifically track what was happening on very subtle levels. And in some cases, we found that while these vigils were going on, that actual battles were averted. For example, another time when we were getting ready to begin a bombing campaign of Iraq, Greg and Doreen and I called one of these vigils. Hundreds of thousands of people responded. And we didn't know until the next day that at the same time this was happening, President Clinton had given the order for the bombing to begin, and the planes were in the air waiting to launch their weapons. But somehow, and we don't even know why, but they just couldn't do it. And he brought the planes back, put them back up, brought them back, and it was almost as if, at least at that moment, with so many people focusing their prayers of peace, it was as if we couldn't bomb them. We couldn't start that war. And we've had so many other instances where it's shown me that this level of prayer is not only a powerful force, but I believe the most powerful force in the universe.
Longtime members of Spiritual Cinema Circle have been really fortunate to see your films Indigo and Indigo Evolution. When and where did you get interested in Indigo children?
You know, I would have to say that it kind of happened to me rather than by me. You know, I'd always heard this label, Indigo Children, and had only given sort of a marginal attention to it. But then, almost organically, I began to meet some of these extraordinary children. This ultimately led me to travel to Bulgaria, and I wrote a book called Emissary of Love about that trip, and met many of these children that were being trained in a monastery there, and that really sparked my interest. And I remember I came home not long after that. I live in Ashland, Oregon, and one of my very dear friends, Stephen Simon, was living there at the time, and we went out to lunch one day, and I told him I had this idea for a film. And Stephen, you know, he had left Hollywood. He didn't want to have anything to do with,
I remember those days.
Film anymore. But I said, think of it this way. We could do a small independent film, hire the people that we know and love, and we'll raise the money. And that sparked him. And the story of this young indigo girl sparked him. And I think that movie, it sparked the whole movement again. You know, people weren't really paying attention so much to the idea of indigo children. It had begun to wane, but I think it brought it back into the mass consciousness again. So, as I said, I think it found me, and I just happened to be the one that had the ability to begin to get that word out again.
Will there be a third Indigo movie?
You know, you've probably heard me say this before. Every time I finish a film, I always say, no more movies. I'm done with the movie business. But I sometimes feel like in Godfather 3, you know, when he says, just when I think I'm out, they pull me back. And I always get these great ideas. I don't have any intention for another Indigo film, but I have a feeling I'm not done with the movie business.
Yeah, I hope not. Your New York Times best-selling book, The Moses Code, is also a film by the same name. What is the Moses Code, and how do we begin to practice it?
Well, the Moses Code itself came from a revelation that I had around the name of God that was given to Moses at the burning bush. You know, most of us have heard that statement, I am that I am. And it never really made sense to me until I realized that maybe it wasn't supposed to be in just one part. It was really a conversation, or in two parts. So instead of just I am that I am, it became I am that, comma, I am. And I realized that what Moses did and what all the great teachers were able to do was to realize that sense of oneness. I am that, which is what I believe God does. God identifies itself as one with all things. And when we do the same, then we kind of enter into that stream, that miraculous stream. And I realize that for Moses and Jesus and so many others, that this is really where the source of their power came from. Their ability to align themselves with that divine current and to enter into that I amness. And the fact is, we are constantly saying, I am this, I am that. We use a Moses code without even realizing it, but unfortunately we usually use it to affirm what we're not. So the practice of the Moses code is really identifying what I am in my core, in my soul. I am holy, I am powerful, I am radiant, and to use the power of that I am statement to affirm that. I had been writing the book, and then your sister, Debbie Ford, who I adore, she was the one who began to bug me about making a movie, and it was really in response to the enormous success of The Secret. We both felt that this was a conversation that needed to continue, and it was really through that we decided to continue it through this discussion on the Moses Code, and it was quite a journey making that movie, but I'm really, really happy with the results.
Tell us about your new project, The Proof.
Well, The Proof actually is a short film that is available free online that is meant to, in a very fun, entertaining way, show that we aren't really the separate, isolated beings that we thought we were, and that we really are one. And there's this thing that I've always done since I was about 17, and it was really always more of a party trick than anything else. But I could always have people hide an object, like in a house, in a building, wherever it was. And then by having them think about where it was hidden, I could find it, usually within a minute or two. And it was always very entertaining. And I've done it over the years, hundreds and even thousands of times. And I was doing it a few months ago, and I thought, this is really a good demonstration on oneness and connection. And so I decided to do an experiment that had never been done before, and I wanted to test my own ability. I began practicing in this mall near my home, and I'd have people hide things in the mall, and I would find them. But the goal was to pick someone, give them $1,000, have them hide a book, which is my next book, The Kabbalah Code, anywhere in the continental U.S. So they could hide it in a tree in Chicago if they wanted, or under a rock in Nevada. The only condition was that I had to be able to legally and physically get to it. And so we picked this young woman. She went off. We had no idea where she went. And she hid the book. And then without any conversation, just working with intuition, I had to then try and first figure out where it was that she went to. And then then we would fly there with the film crew, and then to hopefully find the object. Of course, I won't give it away, but it.
So you haven't found it yet?
Oh, no, well, okay, yes, I did find it. But the process of how I did that, I think, is very fascinating. In fact, there was a strong motivating factor. Hay House, my publisher, wanted me to put 50 grand on the line. So the deal was that if I found it, they would make a $50,000 donation to charity. If I didn't find it, then I had to make that donation.
So who won?
Well, let's just say they made the donation.
Okay.
And so this film, The Proof, we went ahead and put it together. And as I said, this is not a scientific study by any means, but it was a fun, I think, entertaining way of showing this. And I think this is what's needed today, for people to be able to see these things in a way that is going to spark their interest and hopefully inspire them.
Yeah, we'll have to get you a turban. Years ago, I used to do PR for the amazing Kreskin, and he had the same thing. Whenever he did an appearance somewhere, his check would be hidden somewhere in the hall, and he would only get paid if he found the check. And in his entire career, he only didn't get the check once, and it was because they had cemented it into something that he couldn't get to.
Well, you know, Kreskin, I used to see him do this on television, and this is, I think, important to know that when he would do it, he would have someone hold on to his wrist, right?
Oh.
And this is a very old technique that was developed in the early 1900s by a guy named Alex Hellstrom. And it works on psychological and physical cues, and that's how I learned it. So when I was 17 and I learned how to do this, it was a magic trick, right? But over the years, what happened was I began to find ways to separate myself more and more from the person. Maybe they would hold a handkerchief or a pen. And in the proof, for the most part, with this young woman we picked, I have no physical contact at all. She's just walking next to me. So what started off as a magic trick evolved into something that was real, which...
you can now teach people, right?
Well, there is an internet course. If people want to see the movie, they can, I think, probably just go to my site, jamestwyman.com. There's a little link for the proof, and that'll take them to Hay House. And if they want, the first 2 lessons are free on the course, and they can go check it out and learn how to do it themselves.
Fun. So, Jimmy, last question for you. If time, money, and talent were no obstacle, what kind of movie would you make?
Oh, boy. You know, I would love to make a new kind of movie about the life of Jesus, one that brings him into a more humanly accessible place, without dampening the extraordinary way that he lived his life and taught in the miracles, but to, once again, as we said before, to bring him, as I think we all need to do, to this place of accessibility. And I think we could do a Gandhi sort of epic, but in a way that lets us relate to someone like Jesus, so that we can understand that really he's no different than us. He struggled with many of the same issues that we struggle with, and yet we have within us, as he had within him, this extraordinary soul that could open and awaken and change the world. So if I had an endless stream of money and talent, I think that's the film that I would make. You know, the story of Jesus in a way that had never been told before.
God, I want to see that movie. Well, we're out of time, Jimmy, but thank you so much. It's just been so much fun talking with you today.
Thank you. It's so great to be here, Ariel.